connected to the Brown subject and how we think about sort of the power of people who are often described or thought of as powerless, there's something that has been, if not obsession, then an intense preoccupation of historians for many years now, is the question of the agency of enslaved people in this period and in the earlier history of the United States more generally. And I was wondering if you could talk about that in connection to the politics of the 1850s.
Right. Well, I don't necessarily, I guess I agree with Walter Johnson that I think the term agency is one that might be retired for a while. There was a long period where it was used in very fruitful ways to counteract the notion of slaves just being inert, acted upon rather than actors in history. But I think the term agency became so distended that it began to include anything anybody did was a form of agency. In a sense, that may be may be true, but then it loses all analytical clarity. I think I agree with Stephen Hahn and others who say the slaves had a politics, they had a political consciousness. My work on Reconstruction, which we'll come to down the road, people came out of slavery with clear political ideas, and they didn't just develop them in 1865, just like that. These ideas had incubated, so to speak, in slavery. But the terrain on which you can operate with those ideas was very, very limited. I think slaves had a consciousness of what kind of of injustice being done to them and of desire to be equal part of American society in some ways. But the options for exercising that were pretty limited under slavery. I do think the fugitive slave issue is very important here. Fugitive slaves running away is a political action as well as a personal action and a family action and many other kinds of actions, but it is a political action. It counteracts pro-slavery ideology about contented slaves. It forces the government to start taking measures which then divide North and South about how to get back fugitive slaves. It puts critical issues about the law and other issues like that on the national agenda. So I think the fugitive slaves, now we don't know how many there were, this is guesswork, some number of thousands before the Civil War. Not enough to undermine the system of slavery in any way, but I think as a political act, running away from slavery is a very, very important intervention in the politics of the 1850s. So, yes, slaves did have a politics, but the realm in which they could act upon that politics was quite limited by the system itself, obviously.